Okay, so the final book of the afternoon is Human Rites by JJ Marsh, and we'd like to invite Rohan Quine to read from that.
Yesterday, a mile of sin. Today, a mile of art. Adrian strolled along the lakeside promenade, hands tucked into coat pockets. The wind whipped across the Binnen Alster, shattering the reflections, stinging his cheeks and making his eyes water as he lifted his face to a hazy sun. Maybe Holger was right, and all 5 museums in one day would be too much to take in. Beatrice's attention span hadn't held out for 2. But to be fair, her mind was still on her work. For someone normally held rapt by Monet and Cézanne, she'd got all excited about some expressionist painters at the Hamburger Kunsthalle and scuttled off to the office. Adrian set off down the lakeside with a heady enthusiasm, intent on seeing the Bucerius Kunstforum. The combination of good company, art, food and a new city to explore had filled him with energy. He stopped and gazed across the water. Pleasure boats, grand architecture with uniform rows of windows, archways, floating bars, bridges, wide pavements along wider streets, ornate spires and so many expanses of water. Hamburg had a lot of space. Unlike the cramped, narrow back streets of London, everything was broad and open to the sky. He could breathe here. He could live somewhere like this. Maybe he and Holger should talk about their differences and try again. Weekend markets, art galleries, the sea, all in the company of a beautiful, sensitive man. Adrian could do all that. There was only one thing he couldn't do. Kids. Daydreaming. He shook his head and retrieved his mobile from inside his coat. The navigator app said the museum was just past the next bridge. Snowflakes began falling, fat and wet, melting on impact with the ground. He held out his gloved hand to catch one and raised his face to the sky, sticking out his tongue. A silent white barrage pelted onto his face, hair, shoulders and shoes, and finally into his mouth. He took a selfie with the lake as a backdrop, pulling a pantomime expression of wonder. He wasn't sure who for. The wind and cold started to seep through his clothes. He shook himself, patting his coat to dislodge the setting flakes, and looked beside him to see if anyone had noticed his childish behaviour. Less than 100 yards away, on the other side of the street, stood a nun. She was staring directly at him, her arms folded over a black coat, an expression of disgust on her face. Through the snowflakes, like some slow-motion automated mannequin, she shook her head 3 times. Adrian's breath caught in his throat, the cold going far deeper than his clothes. A huge tourist bus rumbled past, blocking his view, and he looked up to see faces pressed against the coach windows, peering down at him as if he were part of the tour. He made a decision. He would not be hounded by some judgmental stalker. Whatever her motive, she was the one who should be afraid. Once the coach had passed, he dodged through the traffic and vaulted over the central reservation. His coat flapping, he splashed through a puddle and tore across 2 more lanes to confront her. A sudden gust of wind forced snow into his face, making it hard for him to see. He reached the point where she'd been standing. No one. Nothing. Not even footprints, as the snow was too wet to stick. He ran as far as the corner, but there was no sign of her. In the middle of the tree-lined avenue, snowflakes spinning around his head, he couldn't be sure she'd even been there at all. His feet were wet and his trousers splattered with mud. He decided to forget the museum for now and get back to the hotel to change. Cold and unsettled, he made his way to the U-Bahn, seeking the comfort of ordinary people.